All right, let me give you some background. My soon-to-be ex-wife was my high school sweetheart. We started dating back in 1992 when we were both 17. Now we're both 45, and we've been together ever since. She's the only woman I've ever been with in my life. We tied the knot 5 years later, at 22, right after graduating from college. A year after that, we welcomed our first of two sons. The boys are 22 and 17 now. I dedicated 23 years to her, built her a house, and worked tirelessly to provide the life she wanted. Sure, we hit some rough patches along the way, but what marriage doesn't face challenges? Even during our toughest times, we managed to get through and come out stronger. That's why discovering her affair was such a shock. Flashback to March 2020 when I first sensed something was off. For the 2 months leading up to that, we had been in a rut. I was recovering from knee surgery. I'd torn my ACL in the fall of 2019, and my movement was still restricted. I had only about 55% range of motion in my knee, which was affecting a lot around the house. Since I was on workers' comp due to the injury, I couldn't keep up with my usual household chores, and things piled up. My sons did what they could, but tasks that only I could handle were either left undone or my wife had to do them, which she clearly resented. Our intimacy also hit a standstill. It had already slowed down before my injury, but it completely stopped while I was recovering. During these months, Laura, that's what I'll call her, started spending more time hanging out with coworkers after work. This was a regular occurrence from November 2019 to March 2020. Naturally, I didn't think much of it at first. In the 23 years we'd been together, I had no reason to distrust her. She had her friends, I had mine, and we shared mutual friends as well. I would hang out with my friends frequently without any issues. It was all above board. But around January of this year, I started to notice something strange. Laura began to seem more distant. Sure, we were in a funk, but she had never been this cold before. The usual hugs and kisses stopped. Her phone, which she had always been willing to share with me, was now clutched tightly in her hand. She used to show me interesting things she'd found online, DIY ideas, recipes, memes, but now she was protective of her phone. Her interactions with me also became increasingly snippy, as though she was too busy to bother with me. By March, COVID-19 had hit, and New York City was under lockdown. Since our jobs were deemed essential, neither of us needed to work from home. I'd just been cleared to return to work after 5 months off, and I was itching to get back into my routine. 5 months of rehab and being inactive drove me crazy. I enjoy physical activities. I'm a martial artist and typically hit the gym 4 days a week, not to mention all the home projects I tackled. Within a week or two of the lockdown, Laura told me she would need to put in extra hours at work. I didn't think much of it due to her field. I assumed it would be every other day, but it turned out to be every day. And not just a couple of hours. She was coming home 3 or more hours late. She'd head straight for the shower, spend a bit of time with me, and our 22-year-old was living with his girlfriend across town, and then go to bed. As I started to get better on my knee, we tried to be intimate again, but it was clear she wasn't mentally or emotionally engaged. By early April, things started to make sense. The signs were all pointing to an affair. That's when I decided I needed to get to the bottom of it. I began researching signs of infidelity, and sure enough, Laura seemed to be checking all the boxes. My search then shifted to finding proof. I started with her social media. Her Facebook posts from months earlier were mostly the usual. Pictures of us and our kids, photos with friends, and several images of nights out with coworkers. In these photos, there was a guy who kept appearing, often looking uncomfortably close to Laura, his arm around her shoulder, or his hand resting on her lower back. Far too close for comfort, especially since I didn't know him personally. Needless to say, it left a bad taste in my mouth. But that wasn't even the worst part. No, the worst part wasn't just the affair itself. It was discovering that this guy was actually friends with Laura on Facebook and followed her on Instagram. I went to check out his Facebook profile, and guess what? I was blocked. I couldn't understand why I'd be blocked from seeing his profile while he was still connected with Laura. That was it. I went full detective mode. At this point, I wasn't trying to deny the reality anymore. I knew for sure she was cheating on me with this guy. My new mission was to find out how long this had been going on. Over April and May, I dug deep. I had no idea how much information you could pull from phone, text, and email records until then. We had a family cell phone plan, and I was able to retrieve a significant amount of data. The records were revealing. From October 2019 to April 2020, the two most frequently contacted numbers were mine and a number I didn't recognize. A quick Google search confirmed it belonged to the guy from the photos who had blocked me on Facebook. I'll call him POS, because that's exactly what he is. The picture was becoming clearer, but many of their messages seemed fragmented, suggesting Laura was deleting a lot of them. I knew she was cheating, but I still needed more concrete proof. That's when I confided in my best friend, Max. I told him what I had found, and he asked if I'd confronted Laura yet. I said no, because I didn't feel like I had enough evidence. Max then told me about an app that could monitor her communications in real time. I won't mention the app by name, but I installed it, synced it with my data plan, and waited. Within days, I saw it. A text conversation between Laura and the guy, talking about how much fun they'd had the night before, and making plans to meet again that weekend. It was a gut punch. To say I was devastated is an understatement. That moment felt like my personal D-Day, and I spent the next 2 days feeling utterly broken. During those 2 days, I deliberately kept my distance from Laura, which visibly shook her. She tried to comfort me and ask what was wrong, but I just brushed her off and avoided her. I couldn't even stand to look at her. This was the woman I had given 23 years of my life to, who I had dedicated everything to as a husband, and she betrayed me with a guy only 5 years older than our eldest son. By the 3rd day, my sorrow had turned into anger. I reached out to Max to let him know my suspicions were confirmed, and he asked if I'd confronted Laura yet. I told him no, and I expressed that I wanted more than just a divorce. I wanted to completely dismantle her life and make her suffer. I knew it would take time, so I started devising a plan. In my research on infidelity, I had come across a quote that stuck with me. The enemy of infidelity is unpredictability. That became the cornerstone of my strategy. I planned to make her life a nightmare while secretly preparing my escape. By early June, I still had the app running, collecting as much data as possible. Each night, I gathered information on their back-and-forth messages, which revealed a full-blown relationship, sexting, romantic messages, nudes, the whole package. I stopped reading the details and focused solely on cataloging the information on my private server. Meanwhile, I started doing things out of the ordinary. I went out at unusual times and came home even later than Laura did. When she saw me on my phone more than usual and asked what I was up to, I'd just say, just stuff, and put my phone away. I also changed my login information on all my accounts so she couldn't access any of my stuff. Throughout our marriage, we'd always been transparent with each other, but around the time her affair began, she'd changed her Facebook password and locked her phone, claiming it was due to recent security breaches. Nice cover for hiding an affair from her husband, right? I filled Max in on my plan and also told my older sister and 2 close friends about what was going on. These are people I trust implicitly, and I made them swear to keep it confidential. For context, Max and I have been friends since childhood. Eric and Karen, who've been friends since high school, are also in the loop. Remember Karen, she plays a role later on. July rolled around, and my soon-to-be ex-wife was in full-blown paranoia mode. She started texting and calling me way more often, constantly asking if I'd be home when she got there, when I was coming home if I wasn't there already, and what I was up to. It was clear that the seed of doubt I'd planted in her mind the previous month was starting to sprout, especially in her conversations with POS. She was confiding in him about her doubts and confusion, telling him that I was becoming cold and distant. The nerve of this woman. During these exchanges with POS, she even suggested they should stop meeting at our house because she wasn't sure if I might just show up, confirming that she had indeed brought this jerk into our home. Thanks for that, Laura. POS then asked her if she was worried I might be cheating on her, which really ticked her off. I can't even describe how much joy and laughter I got from reading that. My unfaithful wife arguing with her affair partner about whether she should be worried about me cheating. The irony was off the charts. Now keep in mind, I wasn't seeing anyone else. When I left the house, I'd usually hang out with Max or Eric, drinking and watching fights, or I'd be at my sister's place spending time with her and my brother-in-law, who's like an older brother to me. My sister, who's 52, and her husband, 58, knew about Laura's cheating but not about my revenge plan. I couldn't risk it since he's a bit of a blabbermouth. Fast forward to October, and things really start heating up. By then, I'd been playing along with my fake affair for 3 months. and Laura was hyper-aware that I was pulling away from her. It had been so long since I'd even touched her. No hugs, no kisses, no intimacy. Not like she needed it. She was still with POS, either at his place or at motels. Then one afternoon, she called me at work. This wasn't unusual before all this mess, but it had been a while, and she asked me to come straight home after work because she had something important to tell me. I half expected her to come clean about her affair, but of course she didn't. Instead, when I got home, she started questioning whether I was unhappy with her. The audacity. She mentioned that I'd been spending too much time away from home, hadn't shown her any affection, and that our sex life had completely died. She expressed worry that I was pushing her away because of how she treated me during my knee rehab. And then came the punchline. She asked if I was cheating on her. I fell on the floor laughing hysterically. And I mean, laughing so hard it was like Joker-level laughter. To her, it probably looked like I was just dismissing the idea of being unfaithful. But in reality, I was laughing at the sheer absurdity of the situation. I was practically in tears from laughing so hard before I managed to compose myself. I sat up, looked her in the eye for the first time in months, shook my head without giving her an answer, then stood up, brushed myself off, kissed the top of her head, and went about my evening. Later that night, I was in my office and decided to check what Laura was telling POS. I fired up the app, and sure enough, they were texting in real time. She told POS, "I know he's cheating on me. I asked him tonight and he literally laughed in my face. He fell on the floor and laughed for like 5 minutes. He doesn't even care about me anymore. I don't know how or why, but he's gone. I know I've lost him. This is karma, I know it." The grin on my face must have looked like the Cheshire Cat's. She was unraveling. POS tried to comfort her, saying that if I cared about her, she wouldn't have had to come to him for what I wasn't giving her. But her responses indicated she was starting to doubt. It was infuriating that she had the nerve to cheat on me because I couldn't fully be the husband I once was due to an injury, and had kept the affair going for nearly a year. Yet the thought of losing me to another woman made her waver? What a weakling. During all this, I was also executing the second part of my revenge plan, getting my financial affairs in order. In September, I met with a family attorney to start the divorce process, armed with the mountain of evidence I had gathered. New York is an at-fault state for divorce, and the overwhelming proof of Laura's infidelity meant I could nail her in court. My lawyer advised me to get all my finances sorted for asset division, so I took it a step further. I secretly transferred all my money from our joint account into my personal account. I also started looking for an apartment as part of phase 2 inches of my plan. By November, I hadn't eased up on my act. In fact, I had ramped it up. This is where my friend Karen comes into the picture. To give you some background, Karen and Laura have never exactly been on friendly terms. I met Karen in freshman year of high school 2 years before I even knew Laura. From the start, Laura saw Karen as a threat because she's my closest female friend. There was always this unspoken distrust from Laura when it came to Karen, even though she never outright said anything. Anyone paying attention could see it. On the flip side, Karen wasn't fond of Laura either. Early in my relationship with Laura, Karen pointed out how Laura was inserting herself into our close-knit group of friends, while I had never done the same with Laura's friends. Karen was annoyed because she saw through Laura's motives, namely, her jealousy of Karen. Even now, Laura's circle of friends has no male presence, except for POS, while Karen is the only woman in my group. Karen had been stuck overseas due to the pandemic and finally made it back to NYC on November 3rd. To celebrate her return, Max, Eric, and I decided to have a dinner and drinks night at Eric's house. It was just the 5 of us: Max, Eric, Eric's wife, who is also Karen's sister, Karen, and me. We were sticking to CDC guidelines, taking the virus seriously. Karen, being the schemer she is, came up with a devious plan to mess with Laura's head. She suggested we take photos similar to the ones I'd seen of Laura and POS months ago and post them on my Facebook. That's exactly what we did. It wasn't until the 5th that Laura caught wind of it. I'm guessing a few friends saw the updates and noticed how uncomfortably close I was with Karen. This really rattled Laura because she still suspected I was cheating, and I'm almost sure she wanted to accuse Karen. But she knew Karen had been stuck in Europe for most of the year. Still, Laura tried to confront me about being so handsy in the photos. I seized this opportunity to land a solid jab. I said, So what about the photos of you and POS from last year? He was pretty handsy too. Did you see me get upset over it? Laura was caught completely off guard. It was the first time I'd even mentioned POS's name throughout this whole mess. The wheels were visibly turning in her head as she scrambled to explain the photos. To that point, she hadn't known I'd seen them, given how infrequently I use Facebook. When I do post, it's like an event, which is why the photos with Karen got so much attention among our friends. And explain away she did. He's that way with everyone. He's just really friendly. I see how it looks, but there's nothing there. I'm sorry if those photos hurt you. I'll delete them. No, Laura, it wasn't the photos that hurt me. It was the year of cheating while you lied to me about working extra hours and hanging out with friends. But as Lieutenant Com Worf from Star Trek, TNG famously said, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." From that night on, Laura was extra clingy and attentive, almost annoyingly so. She tried to initiate affection and intimacy, but I shut her down every time. Meanwhile, I continued to document every interaction she had with POS. By this point, I was emotionally numb. Any desire to salvage my marriage had evaporated the day I set my plan into motion. Laura confided in POS that I was becoming worse, that she felt I absolutely hated her, which I did. Then came the bombshell. She told him she couldn't see him anymore. The guilt was overwhelming, and she felt like karma was closing in on her. She couldn't risk losing me. She admitted that while she loved POS deeply, she was still in love with me and needed to save her marriage before it was too late. I couldn't help but think, you're about 8 months too late for that. POS lost his cool, sending messages like, he doesn't love you the way I love you, and you're making a mistake. You can't just throw me away like this. That text chain turned out to be their last communication until about 3 weeks ago. From late November into December, Laura was in a state of limbo, trying to figure out where I stood and still uncertain if I was cheating. Meanwhile, POS bombarded her with daily texts, but she ignored them. I noticed her frequently checking her phone and quickly putting it away. As for me, phase 2 of my plan was complete. The divorce papers were prepared, and I had found a studio apartment in Co-op City. New Yorkers will know the area and signed a 2-year lease. All my money was in my personal account. I was ready to throw my haymaker. It was Thanksgiving, and my oldest son and his girlfriend were hosting a small gathering with our immediate family. Them, her parents since she's an only child, myself, Laura, and our youngest. The evening went well. My oldest girlfriend, who's studying to be a chef, did all the cooking herself. Let me tell you, the girl can cook. As part of keeping up appearances, I made a point to show affection to Laura several times throughout the night. I gave her kisses on the cheek, little hugs, and wrapped my arms around her shoulders from behind. She seemed to bask in the attention. Mind you, this was the first time I'd touched her since I kissed the top of her head back in October, roughly 2 months. I felt repulsed doing it, but it was necessary to keep the facade intact. Being distant with her in front of the boys, my oldest girlfriend, and her parents would have raised suspicions. After the gathering, our youngest decided to stay over with his older brother for the night, so Laura and I headed home. On the drive, she thanked me for being so good to her and said, "I don't know what you're going through, baby, but I'm here for you." I had to stifle a burst of maniacal laughter and simply replied, "I know, I just need time." That night, for the first time in what felt like forever, we had sex. Given what I was planning, I figured I might as well get some action before completely removing her from my life. It wasn't exactly romantic. Afterward, she was left dazed and confused, like she'd been run over by a truck. There was no cuddling or aftercare. I just got up, showered, and went to sleep in my office. To her surprise, I used a condom, something I hadn't done in 2 decades. She was puzzled, but didn't question it. I wasn't about to go raw with her, knowing she'd been doing that with POS for months. The next morning, I checked my spy app for the first time in weeks. Laura had finally responded to POS. His messages were like a novella, full of declarations of love and lamenting about how she was wasting her time trying to rekindle something with me. He said she had been in a prison with me for 23 years and deserved to be with someone who would cherish her. This guy, who's 27 years old, 5 years older than our oldest son, was so infatuated with a 45-year-old married mother of 2? What a top-tier simp. She chose to destroy our family for him. A pretty boy with a soft side. Hilarious. Laura responded similarly to how she had before. She said she loved him and enjoyed their time together, but couldn't lose me. I was still the love of her life, but she'd always have a place for him in her heart. They could remain friends if he wanted, but their physical relationship was over. He begged for one last meeting that week, and, as you might guess, she agreed. One last rendezvous for old time's sake. I documented all of this in my archive. December 4th marked the beginning of Phase 3, the final phase of Operation Shinobi Ghost. With the divorce papers ready and my new place set up, it was time to start moving my stuff out of the house. But first, I needed to break the news to my boys. I called my oldest over to the house that Friday night and had a talk with them in my office. I didn't go into specifics but told them that their mother had been cheating on me for over a year and that I would be filing for divorce soon. My 17-year-old was particularly shaken. He had recently gone through his own experience with infidelity. His first girlfriend had cheated on him just 4 months prior. Learning that his own mother was capable of such betrayal hit him hard. My oldest took it better and suggested that his brother move in with him until things settled down, which I agreed to. We packed up some of my youngest son's things, and he asked if I was going to be okay. I told him, "Yes, son, I'm going to be all right, and so are you. We're going to be all right, I promise." With that, they left. The hardest part was behind me, and now it was time to execute the final phase of my plan. Over the next few weeks, Max helped me discreetly move sensitive items out of the house. I gave him a list of things to retrieve while Laura and I were at work and left him a spare key. These were items Laura wouldn't notice missing unless someone pointed them out. I also got a new phone and number, updating only those who needed to know: Max, Eric, Karen, my boys, my big sister, and my mother. Meanwhile, I maintained the facade with Laura, sprinkling in bits of affection to keep her off the trail, while she remained in contact with POS. The emotional connection between them was still faint but present. I meticulously gathered all the data I had archived, call logs, texts, pictures, emails, everything, and began making printouts. I must have spent over $1,500 on supplies: printer ink, paper, binders, you name it. I cataloged everything from the start of the affair up to the most recent updates on December 16th into 14 binders. Each binder was placed in a box, wrapped as a gift, and addressed to various people. My father had passed away 7 years prior. Laura's parents, her 2 sisters, her brother, her HR department. Did I mention POS works for the same company, and there's a strict rule against intercompany relationships? Several of her friends, POS, and POS's parents. I took all of them to the post office and shipped them out on December 16th, with an estimated delivery between December 22nd and 24th. Perfect timing. Christmas Eve arrived. Laura came home at the usual time. I wasn't sure if she had seen POS. I had stopped tracking her on the app on the 18th, figuring I had gotten all the mileage I needed. As usual, she showered, spent some time with me, and we had sex on the living room couch. Yes, I know, it's pretty ruthless. She went to bed, and I set the final phase into motion. In the middle of the night, I woke up, wrapped one of the 3 remaining binders containing the divorce papers taped to the inside cover, and placed it on my side of the bed with a note that read, "Merry Christmas." Next to it, I left my old phone and the business card of my lawyer. I packed up the rest of my essentials into 2 backpacks and left the home I had lived in for 23 years for the last time. That was a week ago. To Laura, I am completely off the grid. Shadow ghosted. She's blocked on Facebook, but she hasn't blocked me yet, so I'm keeping an eye on the fallout. It's been glorious. The packages I sent have all reached their destinations, and Laura is getting crucified. Her youngest sister tore into her, her parents condemned her, and my mom really let loose with a scathing critique that I never imagined. Laura is frantically trying to find out where I am, but those who know aren't saying a word. Her Facebook feed is filled with desperate pleas to reach me, but I'm not saying a word to her without my lawyer present. That will be the next time I share a space with her. She has no way to spin the narrative to paint me as the bad guy, as I've exposed her to everyone who matters to her. From what I've heard through a mutual friend who works at the same company, she and POS are being placed on administrative leave starting tomorrow, so she'll likely be entering 2021 without a job. As for the last 2 binders, one has been turned over to my lawyer as my final piece of evidence for the impending divorce, and the last one is in my storage unit, to be burned in Eric's fire pit once the divorce is finalized. Do I feel guilty about any of this? Not in the slightest. I spent 23 years doing right by Laura. I gave her the home she wanted, the family she desired, and the life we both deserved. I loved her unconditionally. I never strayed or even considered breaking my vows. When issues arose, I faced them with her. She chose to find solace in another man's bed instead of addressing our issues. She stepped out with a young man who excited her. So no, I have no sympathy for what I did or for her. She can burn in hell for all I care. The most I stand to lose is my house, a car, and maybe a few $100 a month in alimony. But given the evidence I've amassed, the alimony might be waived. As far as I'm concerned, she's dead to me, and I'm not looking back. Christmas Day was my first full day in the new apartment. It's still a work in progress. There's more I want to add to make it feel complete. But I'm settling in well. My boys and my eldest girlfriend came over and spent a good part of the day with me. She brought over some treats she'd made and whipped up a fantastic meal. It was great to sit and talk with my sons like we hadn't done in a long time. My big sister also dropped by with more goodies and spent some time with us. It had been nearly a year since she'd seen her nephews, so it was a welcome reunion. Having everyone around really lifted my spirits. If I had been alone, I probably would have drunk myself into a stupor. After everyone left around 8 p.m., I decided to visit Eric and his wife, Claudia. We hung out for a couple of hours, had a few drinks, and then I went back to my new place. The next significant development happened last week on December 29th. Around midday, I received a text from Karen asking if I was free that evening. I wasn't busy, so we decided to meet up after work. We went to a diner nearby. In NYC, indoor dining is limited to 25% capacity due to the pandemic, but it's usually not hard to find a seat since many people still prefer to eat at home. Once we were seated and had ordered our food, Karen laid all her cards on the table. Honestly, I had been expecting something like this. She confessed that she had had feelings for me since our teenage years, but never got the chance to express them because Laura came along and took me before she could. For context, I've known Karen for 2 years longer than I've known Laura. She has always been part of my social square, alongside Max and Eric. Back in high school, we were the social outcasts, the raver kids who didn't fit into any of the other cliques. Karen had a weight problem and was diabetic, often overlooked by guys, but we always had great chemistry. These days, Karen is a personal trainer and yoga instructor. She's transformed from the heavy-set goth girl into a stunning woman. Long story short, we decided that once the divorce is finalized, we're going to start seeing each other. And yes, I spent the night with her. I took her back to my new place, and we had a fantastic time. Am I ashamed? Not at all. Karen has been a better friend to me than Laura ever was. Not that Laura wasn't my best friend, she was. But Karen's unwavering support and even stepping back to let me pursue a life with Laura showed a level of selflessness that is rare and deeply meaningful. To me, it was a genuine act of love. So, no, I'm not justifying my decision in my head. I believe it was the right choice, and I'm looking forward to exploring what comes next with Karen with full commitment. Now, on to yesterday, January 6th, when I met with Laura and her lawyer to discuss the divorce. It's been 2 weeks since I disappeared from my soon-to-be ex-wife's life. This past Monday, I received a call from my attorney informing me that Laura's lawyer had scheduled a meeting for us to discuss the terms of the divorce. I met with my lawyer on Tuesday morning to go over my terms. In short, I'm seeking an uncontested divorce on the grounds of marital neglect. My terms are as follows. Full division of assets. With me selling my half of the house to her, she can keep it. We each retain our respective vehicles and I keep my cabin in the Poconos. Due to the grounds of marital neglect, I'm not offering any spousal support. As for 17, which I'll refer to my son from here on, he'll be free to choose who he wants to live with after the divorce, which will most likely be me. On Wednesday, I showed up to my lawyer's office dressed in my best Johnny Cash attire. Laura and her lawyer were there as well. She looked like she was barely holding it together. I maintained a stone face throughout the proceedings. Her lawyer presented an offer for terms of reconciliation, but I shot it down almost immediately. To keep it brief, we agreed on a legal separation leading to an uncontested divorce. The only adjustment was that I would pay her $653 a month in temporary spousal support to cover her utility costs until she's gainfully employed again. Yes, she got fired because of the affair with POS, who was also terminated. This support will last up to a year after the finalization. I earn enough that this won't hurt me financially, even if she takes a while to find a new job, and she has enough savings to live on for some time. After a full calendar year post-divorce, she's on her own. It's a small price to pay for getting rid of her cheating ass. The process should take about 3 months, so if all goes smoothly, I'll be free of her by early April. After the meeting, my lawyer gave me some final words and said he would update me on the progress of the filing. As I was leaving, Laura chased me down and asked if we could talk. I decided to give her that chance. She managed to hold herself together during the meeting, but outside, she let the tears flow, saying how sorry she was and how she never intended for things to go as far as they did. She claimed she never expected to fall in love with POS, but recognized how wrong it was to betray me in such a way. She asked if I could ever forgive her, and if maybe in a few years, we could start over. She said she couldn't imagine her life without me. I told her to start imagining it soon because this would be the last time we would speak or see each other. I explained that 17 is almost an adult and can make his own choices about his future. I told her I had given her half of my life and every ounce of love I had unconditionally, and she, in her own words, fell in love with another man. There was no chance of forgiveness from me. All the love I had for her was slowly destroyed during the months she confided in and professed her love to POS, rather than addressing any issues with me directly. I told her I loved who she once was, but hated who she had become. If I never saw her again, it would be too soon. We stood on the sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan, with her making a scene and crying. A few passers-by gave us sidelong glances, but at that point, I didn't care. I wasn't about to publicly humiliate her. I had already done that professionally and socially. I needed to get the last bit of emotion out. I told her I didn't regret the 23 years I spent with her. I regretted that in those 23 years, she chose the easy way out instead of addressing our problems. And thanks to some advice from Reddit, I added that for 23 years, I thought she was mine. But it turned out it was just my turn. I put in my Raycons, turned around, and walked away. Later that night, Laura's father called me to apologize. He praised me for always being a good man to his daughter and expressed his shame over her actions, saying he had raised her better. I won't lie, I'm going to miss the old man. My dad passed away years ago, so he's been my de facto father figure. But I can't see myself maintaining any relationships with her family after this. After that call, I updated my Facebook relationship status to divorced. It's not official yet, but in my eyes it's over. When I post on Facebook, it's usually an event. So many people reached out via Messenger asking questions. I explained that I'd filed for divorce earlier in the day. Karen called me, shocked at how quickly I pulled the trigger. While she knew I was in the process, she had no idea how advanced it was. I invited her over, and she came running. We spent the night together, and she stayed the night. We talked into the early hours of the morning. I haven't felt this level of relief and connection in a long time. Karen gets me, and I can't get enough of being around her. Since the day she confided her feelings, she has been all I've been thinking about. Some might say it's too soon to move on, but as far as I'm concerned, my marriage ended the day POS and Laura crossed that line, so I'm overdue for a fresh start. So that's it. The divorce is in the works, and I'm moving on to start a relationship with Karen.